Perdida en el azul, me muevo lentamente.
I'm Michael Cassidy, the Executive Director of the Commonwealth Institute for Fiscal Analysis in Richmond. It's my pleasure to share with you today some information and data on what poverty looks like in our state. As you begin your discussions about the challenges of poverty and possible solutions for tackling this problem in Virginia, I wanted to share with you some facts and figures on what poverty looks like here in Virginia. We are a fairly well-to-do state, and as a result, our poverty levels are below the national average. As you can see, the national average is about 13% poverty rate. Virginia, at 9.9%, is well below that national average. However, we do have significant challenges here. For example, we really have been unable to make any discernible progress in reducing the poverty rate in close to the last 20 years. As this slide shows, the rates of poverty in Virginia have hovered around that 10% for 20 years in our state. Poverty in Virginia is both a rural and an urban problem. This map shows poverty rates by locality throughout the state, with the darker blue sections being the higher rates of poverty. And as you can see, there's large rates of poverty in rural areas in Southside and Southwest Virginia, as well as urban pockets sprinkled throughout the state. The face of poverty in Virginia is typically that of a white person. More than half of the people living in poverty are white, 36.5% are African American, 9.14% are Hispanic, and 3.5% are Asian. But when we drill into these numbers to see how different communities within our state face poverty, we see some different outcomes. For example, the poverty rate among African Americans, your chances more or less of being in poverty if you are African American, is considerably higher than other populations in the state. For African Americans, it's 18.5%. For Hispanics and Latinos, it's 13.6%, whereas for whites or non-Hispanics throughout the state, it's only 7.3%. Education plays a key role in people's ability to avoid poverty, and you can see that in the rates of poverty experienced by individuals when we look at them by educational attainment. For example, if you have less than a high school degree, poverty rates among that population are 21.5%. But education pays. As this graph shows, the percentages of being in poverty drop dramatically by different educational attainment levels. For example, simply being a high school graduate cuts your chances of being in poverty by more than half, down to 9.4%. And for folks who have a bachelor's degree or higher, the poverty rate is only 2.2%. Unfortunately, in Virginia, the rates of children in poverty have been rising in recent years. This graph shows the percentage of kids who are living in poverty, and we see an unfortunate trend line of increases in this percentage since 2004. So wrapping it all up, if we think about something that we all know and love, namely NASCAR, the Richmond International Raceway is an enormous venue where people come to enjoy the sport. That raceway could be filled up more than 7 times, that is, every day for an entire week, with the number of people living in poverty in Virginia, and it could be filled up more than twice for a whole weekend's event, just by the number of kids living in poverty in Virginia. So clearly, it's a challenge for our state. There are also some areas where we have some troubling signs. For example, in the current recession, we've seen a significant uptick in the number of people who are unemployed, growing by 122% since the recession started in December of 2007. However, some of our key social safety net programs, like food stamps and welfare, have not had similar increases. Food stamps has only increased 17.5%, whereas TANF has only increased 9.78%. This is a signal that perhaps the way our safety net programs are oriented is not responding to growing needs of a worsening economy here in the state. In addition, the number of children who will receive TANF is far below the number of kids who are in poverty and those who live in deep poverty, which is people who are living in families where income is only half the federal poverty limit. As you can see from this graph, the red line represents the number of kids who receive TANF in our state. The blue and green lines represent the kids in deep poverty and those living under the federal poverty limit. The number of kids on TANF is sharply below both of these trend lines and raises a good question for us all about whether, in fact, our TANF program, our state's main welfare program, is being responsive to the needs of this target population, namely kids living in poverty. We also have fairly strict food stamp eligibility in Virginia. The white states are states that have eligibility for food stamps below 130% of poverty. The colored states and hatchmark states are representing the 17 states that have gone beyond those strict eligibility and have raised their eligibility so as to meet the needs of a larger number of people struggling either in poverty or just above poverty to provide them food security. One of the key ways that we can fight poverty is by providing assistance to people who lose their jobs. The Congressional Budget Office, for example, found that unemployment insurance plays a key role in keeping people who've lost their jobs from falling into poverty. The poverty rates of those who are unemployed for a long time are half what they are for people who have unemployment insurance as for those who don't have unemployment insurance. Unfortunately, in Virginia, our unemployment insurance system has a lot of holes. If you lose your job in the state, you really only have about a 1 in 4 chance of even being covered by the unemployment insurance system. This graph shows that recipiency rate and how it's been hovering around 25% in Virginia. In fact, only 4 states extend unemployment insurance to fewer unemployed workers than does Virginia. And so this is also a key area that we could perhaps think about ways that we could respond more to the needs of people in poverty, help them avoid poverty, and respond to their current needs, especially in the difficult economy we're in. In addition, folks who are working often don't make enough to be above the poverty line. In Virginia's economy, more than 1 in 5 workers are working, but not able to earn enough to bring them above the poverty limit. So this raises another question for us to debate, which is, what should we do with wages in our state to make sure that folks who are working and working full-time can make enough to be out of poverty? One of the key social safety net programs we also have throughout the country is health insurance for low-income people. Our state's Medicaid spending, however, is quite low. We are 47th in the amount that we spend per capita on folks for public health insurance. In addition, we have very stringent rules and requirements in order to allow people to get on Medicaid. For example, we're 44th in the country in the percentage of the income that you can earn in order to get on the state's Medicaid program. Essentially, if you're a working parent, for example, and you make more than $6,000 a year, you can't get public insurance in Virginia. This is also a key challenge that we should debate around perhaps providing a more adequate safety net program through health insurance, which is key for all families, in order to fight poverty more in the state. And finally, our state's tax system is a regressive one. This table shows the percentage of people's income that they pay in taxes, both income, sales, and property taxes, and it's broken down by income group, with the lowest earning 20% on the left and the highest earning upper 1% on the right-hand side. As you can see, in Virginia, we actually tax a higher percentage of the income of low-income folks than we do upper-income folks. This is principally because, as the blue section of the slide shows, we have pretty much a flat income tax structure in Virginia. The highest rate kicks in at only $17,000 a year. The red section represents the amount of people's income that they pay for sales and excise taxes. This shows one of the key challenges for low-income people in our state and those working and fighting their way out of poverty, because we tax a larger percentage of their income through these regressive sales and excise taxes. These are things that we pay when we buy things that are just the basic necessities of life. Lower income people end up spending a larger share of their income to provide these, and as a result of paying sales tax on all these things throughout the year, they end up paying a greater share of their income than do upper income people in taxes. This could be another area that we should discuss about ways to perhaps improve the lot for low income people in the state, to make our state's income tax structure more progressive and allow some relief for low-income people who are struggling. Today's presentation talked about a variety of data to document the different ways in which poverty is a challenge for our state and some of the issues that hopefully will be good topics to discuss in your own sessions.